everyone, and welcome to the Geek Initiative Podcast. This is Tara the Bard, and I'm here with Lee today. You can find the Geek Initiative at geekinitiative.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Roll4Geekinit. That's ROLL4GeekInit. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Firefly gender bender, or what would happen if our very favorite Firefly characters were actually the opposite gender that they are. And this particular podcast is inspired by the Earl Grey podcast. They recently had an episode about the Star Trek The Next Generation crew being the opposite gender that they are. And it was a wonderful podcast, and one of the ladies from Women at Warp, my other favorite podcast, actually guest starred on it, and that got me thinking about Firefly, especially since Joss Whedon is known to create content with a feminist viewpoint. So we're going to talk about how that would have affected things if these characters were different gender. And I do also want to mention that, gender is a sliding scale. We understand it's not just male or female. But for the purposes of this discussion, since it seems that most of these characters do identify as one or the other, we're actually just going to look at that and then talk about them being the opposite. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Lee, one of our fine contributors who is joining me on the podcast. Please say hello, Lee, and give a little introduction.
Hi, all the way from the Sunshine State. My name's Lee. I contribute to the Geek Initiative. I'm a student at USF and an overall nerd, and I love Firefly. And I'm really glad you gave a shout out to our gender non-conforming homies there, Tara. I was worried I was going to have to say something, but awesome.
Nope, I got it covered. So just to get started, I'm gonna quickly list the main characters on the crew of the Serenity. We have Mal, Zoe, Wash, Simon, Kaylee, Jane, River, Inara, Book, and of course Serenity herself. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about what things might be like if we had a female Mal, as it were. See what I did there? So what do you think would be different, if anything, if Mal had been a lady?
Oh man, I mean, everything. It would shift the whole dynamic. I mean, we'd still have our badass captain, but it would change a couple of the dynamics, particularly his relationship with Inara, I believe. I haven't seen in a while. Inara's the consort, correct?
Yeah, she's the companion. Now, of course, it might be different if Inara was still a woman, but it could also be extremely different if Inara's gender had also been changed, and she was now a he.
I know. That's what I think is really interesting. If we're going full board on this, everybody's flipped.
Everyone's flipped. Yeah, let's say everybody's changed.
Then yeah, we would have a strong leading lady as the protagonist, and I think it would really be interesting to see. I think a couple people might get mad and use some particular language about it, but I especially think it would change the dynamic of that one episode, if I can remember off the top of my head. Number 13, the Heart of Gold, where they go to the brothel.
Yeah. Because in the original, of course, Kaylee even makes a remark, oh, they have boy whores, how considerate, because there's like one guy and all the rest of them are women.
Yeah, I think that would have changed that whole dynamic of that episode.
Definitely.
Especially.
And I think, with Mal in general, I mean, he's the male anti-hero, and we see that we see that archetype a lot. We don't see it quite as often with female leads, and I actually reviewed a comic book recently called Graveyard Orbit, and one thing that I loved so much about this comic is that the female protagonist had this anti-hero feel, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so Star-Lord. I love this. She's so Mal, she's so Han Solo, and you don't get that as often. So I think it would be probably actually more interesting if the captain or the anti-hero in general had been the female instead of a male. And moving on kind of down the chain of command, that leads us next to Zoe. And of course, Zoe and Mal had a platonic relationship from the war. She's pretty tough and clearly the one in charge when Mal isn't there. Do you think it would be any different if Zoe had been a guy?
I mean, yeah, obviously, but I think it would be different on, like, the meta level. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee there would be cries of friend zone, that accursed word.
Yeah, yeah.
But ultimately, no. I think their relationship is pretty professional, and I'm already thinking who'd be really good casts for male Zoe.
For the opposite, that's true.
Maybe not Terry Crews. He's too comedical. That one guy who died, I forget what his name is. He was in the Green Mile. Really built guy.
Yeah, that would be an awesome cast. I can also think Zoe. I think she doesn't necessarily use her sensuality that much, like in day-to-day life. I mean, obviously she has her private relationship with her husband, and everyone knows that they love each other. But I think that aspect of the character would be played up in a different way were Zoe a guy. I mean, I think Zoe is, like, aware that it's one part of her total self. She knows herself really well. She kind of owns it, and if anyone were to make a comment about it, she'd probably punch them in the face. But, I think male characters in general, even in the world of Firefly, even in the verse, they're less likely to receive that kind of, criticism or those kinds of remarks. Like, I can easily imagine Zoe as a woman kind of walking around in a spaceport and some guy making a comment and her, like, punching them in the face. But I can't imagine too often, like, a guy walking around in that environment and a random stranger being like, hey, nice butt or something. Like, the closest we really get to that, I think, in the series is when Kaylee calls Mal Captain Tight Pants, like, and it's like a friendly thing. It's not like that happens too often, but I see that in that rugged kind of environment happening a lot. And Zoe, as she is, not really taking any crap for that, crap about that. So, I think either way, Zoe, the character, would still handle herself or himself, pretty capably and efficiently.
Yeah, I can see that whole character just exudes, like, will and confidence.
Yeah, and that might be actually one of the characters where I think people would, like, overlook a gender swap more, just because, like, Zoe isn't masculine, but she definitely exudes a lot of characteristics that are more typically associated with men from, a patriarchal standpoint. And so I think, that would be an easier one to switch over. Now, Wash would be interesting, her husband, because Wash, of course, he's the comedian, and we don't often see, again, the comedic, awkward female. We're starting to see it now. Like, Supergirl is great because in her everyday life, on her TV show, she's totally awkward. She's very much like how Clark is. She's awkward, she moves her glasses, she giggles a lot, she gets crushes, and I think it's really realistic, but we rarely see that in media. So I think, we're getting there. And actually, when I think about Wash being female, that's exactly what I see Kara from Supergirl as female Wash. What about you?
Well, it's what a time to be alive. All this media coming out. So a lot of women are getting represented in the field of comics and movies. A Lady Wash, that would be interesting. I would love to see what style of comedy? Would it be more like an Amy Schumer's better name, or would more like a Sandra Bullock or something? Like,
yeah, I don't know, because the other thing is, like, Wash is totally, obviously, a nerd in the thing. Like, he, does the dinosaur fights on the thing. He's, like, the lovable little boy that never grew up, and that's, like, pretty acceptable in our society for men to still be kind of boyish and, like action figures, and it's still not 100% there for women, but we still do those things. Like, there are some days where I'm like, I'm married, I'm like, hey, hon, I'm not going to do the dishes. I'm just going to go play Elder Scrolls Online for a few hours. Like, women can do that too. It's just not considered acceptable.
Yeah, it's not given, like, equal airtime.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of cool to see.
Yeah, and then we have Simon, the doctor, who, I mean, he seems really another character who can be really awkward and shy, but I can say I've always related to Simon, even though he's a guy, because Simon is super awkward until it's his area of expertise. And then when you start talking about something medical, or something of the sort, something where he has a level of expertise, or where his loyalty is in question, or his family is in question, he's on it, like, that's his topic, and he knows it, and I certainly see that as a characteristic that's, if not easily interchangeable, maybe seen as more applicable to a female character in the confines of our society.
Yeah, I always loved Simon, like, he's trying to be this, like, cold, calculating guy, but he's not, he's just, a nerd. I mean, really he's educated.
And he just loves his family, he just wants to make sure his sister's safe, and I don't think a lady Simon would be quite as oblivious to a female Kaylee being all about her, because ladies, maybe. I think, are like, it's not that we're necessarily more in tune to, like, when people are interested in us or when we're not. I think it's more like we're always on the lookout for the creepers, and Kaylee might be construed as a little bit more of a creeper if Kaylee was a dude, because Kaylee comes on a little strong,
Yeah, but it's cute, and they're perfect segue, by the way. Their dynamic is one of my favorite on the show. It's one of my favorite tropes, this guy bumbling around. Obliviousness amuses me for some reason. Because I suppose as the audience, you're there, and you're like, hey, idiot, look, can you not see? Okay, go ahead, do your thing, man.
She's so into you. Yeah, and it's just, you never see it, you don't really see it the other way around, where if the lady is the one that's depicted as not aware, it's always because the guy is, like, an awkward, bumbling idiot, basically, It's like, if Mary Jane doesn't notice Peter Parker, it's just because he's not on her level. He's not cool enough, And that's just how it works when the woman isn't, like, recognizing the attention of the man. He's just not, like, good enough to basically earn that attention. So it would definitely be interesting if that were flipped.
Yeah, that earning attention thing has problematic elements, but I'd still like to see,
Yeah, I'd like to see how it would play out. That would be really interesting. And of course, a male mechanic is, like, whatever. Like, there are a lot of those in real life. I don't think anyone would have trouble buying that necessarily. What's cool about Kaylee is that not only is she a woman, she's, like, really bubbly and bright and young. And I think, like, a male Kaylee might kind of just be Wesley Crusher,
Shout out to Will Wheaton for that one.
Right? Obvious casting right there.
No, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Well, I think
there
like
would be a problem, however. Some of the audience may or may not attack, and it's always a trope where if a man expresses any kind of femininity or bubbliness, that's not just, oh yeah, macho man, Randy Savage. There's like, it's immediately somehow less of a man, and I think that could be an issue down the road.
And I think that was part of the issue with Wesley on Star Trek as he aged a little bit. People were like, all right, it's time to drop the, like, super naive enthusiasm about outer space. But I think if, you know, Wesley were female, that probably wouldn't have happened as soon.
Yeah.
And then that kind of segues over to a very different character who may be interested in Kaylee, which is Jane. A lot of people think there might be something there, and if you look at how Jane worries over Kaylee after she's been shot, I can definitely see that he's maybe, like, not comfortable with expressing his concern, you know, so he just kind of, like, sits there and, like, watches and, like, rocks and, like, you know, has this urge to protect, but he's also, like, kind of a pig, you know what I mean? Like, that's Jane. So Jane as a woman, you know, like, I can't even begin to think what that would be like, but it would be really interesting.
Jane, our lovable sociopath. I would, wow, just, you know what? We already got, you know, our Furiosa, if you've seen the new Mad Max movie.
That's true.
I think it'd work. It'd be perfectly plausible. Jane being Jane and doing as Jane does, you know, not giving, just wanting to shoot stuff and get paid. Consequences be damned.
And it would be interesting to see a female Jane be, I guess, kind of more expressive in the ways that male Jane is, as in, like, you'd expect Jane to, like, burp and fart, you know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily see that, but you know he's the guy that goes around and is just like, you know, like, you know that's him. So I think that would be kind of interesting because there's this whole thing like, you know, girls don't do that.
Sitting there, picking her nose, like,
right? Yeah,
I
think that would be interesting because he even says, like, someone says Jane's a girl's name, and he's like, well, Jane don't have girl parts, you know, and he's, like, ready to whip it out. Like, can you imagine a woman be like, well, Jane's not a boy, just, like, pulling her shirt up? That would be probably the most interesting gender swap. And then, of course, we have River, which is Simon's sister, and her progress as a character and as a female character in, you know, the canon show is very interesting because we see her and she's, like, basically naked and completely innocent, or so it seems, and helpless. And she, of course, ends up developing into this character who receives such an awakening and becomes really powerful in a way that others hadn't seen. And I think it would be really interesting to see that happen from, you know, if River were a man.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, for the most part, River was kind of the MacGuffin of the show.
Yeah.
For the most part, which is an unfortunate trope women fall into often, be it the damsel in distress or the object of the protagonist's affection. I'm glad we got to see River blossom into something more than just the MacGuffin of the series. Oh, we gotta duck the man because of River, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, and there's also always a thing, you know, is River a threat, or is River, you know, an asset? And I really feel like that would have been questioned a lot less if River were a dude. If River were a guy, they would have been like, great, River's a weapon, let's use him to destroy everything.
Yeah, but, I mean, still, if let's say River was a guy, like they got switched over, I don't know, I still think they'd treat that with the same amount of suspicion of any kind of weird sorcery magic.
That's true. And there's also the relationship between River and her brother Simon. And Simon, of course, is a societally acceptable caretaker because he's a doctor. But, you know, what if he weren't? I think people would just see him as really, like, that is, like, a really effeminate quality. And I think maybe that's why some of the reason why people do kind of see him as, like, a less obvious choice for Kaylee, because, you know, he's not all about, like, fighting, you know, and she even says to him, like, hey, you're not weak, and, which is really funny, because when you see Simon without a shirt on, he's freaking built, you know? And you're like, you are not weak, dude. You could kill someone with your arms. And, but, you know, he has that really nurturing personality that doctors need. And that's certainly expressed, you know, over his concern for River. And I think that relationship would be similar in the, you know, protectiveness, but I think it would also be different because people would, like, more aptly expect a woman to do that. Like, I think with Beverly Crusher, you know, people thought she was kind of bitchy in a way that they wouldn't have, you know, assigned to a male doctor or a male parent. But I think they definitely, like, expected her to be, like, the overprotective mom, you know?
No, I hear what you're saying, yeah.
And then, of course, we have Inara, and she would be one of the most interesting ones to gender swap because, you know, Inara's a companion, and you know, that's traditionally a role held by women, and, you know, even although companions aren't exactly prostitutes, that's, you know, a role that's more often held by women in our society. It would be really interesting to see, you know, especially if it was a male companion with all these female, you know, clients calling, and then you have female Mal, you know, calling Inara a whore. That would be very interesting.
Oh, man, it sounds like a sound to a bad 80s porn film, you know, with
It does.
Inara, the man whore aboard the ship, you know, like, oh, I'll go to your captain's chambers. But he's got, like, super effeminates, too, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, when you switch the genders, like, it almost sounds, like, comical, because it's, like, more acceptable for a woman to be like, yes, this is my life and my lifestyle, whereas if you think about, you know, like, a male companion, it's interesting. I mean, I'd like to see more, like, spin-offs or more in the comics about male companions. That would be kind of fun. And, like, who are their clients? Like, who would be the women that hire the male companion and stuff like that?
Lonely aristocrats. You're right. I'd watch that.
Right. And I think that would be interesting.
For Joss Whedon for including that in there. Adding some sex positivity for, you know, sex workers.
Right, that's true. Especially, it really causes you to rethink, you know, everything that Inara does. And she makes a distinction between being a companion and, you know, the prostitutes at the homestead in Heart of Gold, the episode that you mentioned before. But, you know, she makes a distinction, but she still shows compassion towards them, you know. And I think that would have been even more interesting if Inara had been if Inara had been a guy coming to the rescue, it would have, like, taken something away. But on the other hand, you would have had female Mal coming to the rescue versus, you know, male Mal, the regular Mal, coming to the rescue as he did in the episode. And I think the character Mal, as he is, felt a little strange about, like, being the guy that rode in and saved the day there. You know, like, I think he recognized that trope and was like, I don't know if I want to be that guy, but they definitely need help.
Yeah, gender bent Inara. Inara is always my favorite. She used politics and intrigue like a knife, and instead of just blasting her way out of there, she was smart and cunning, and I always liked that. And I wonder, because those are attributes usually associated with women, I wonder if it would be believable for the audience, given stereotypes and all that nonsense.
Yeah, or if, you know, I kind of wonder, in the universe, do male companions learn a different skill set than the women do? I mean, Inara is competent in combat even, but that's not the path she chose most of the time. So I'd be very interested in seeing how a male companion would have handled that. Would it have been any different? I mean, maybe he would have been even better at being sneaky because, like, no one would ever suspect it of a guy.
Maybe.
And then, of course, we have Shepherd Book and Inara share a very interesting scene where she confronts him about, like, what she does, her work, and, you know, they have a little moment there, and they connect and sort of reconcile that. And I don't think it would have worked. I just don't think it would have worked if Inara was a dude and Book was a lady. I don't know. I mean, it might have, but it's just like, it's hard to kind of think of that reversed. And Book as a character, I actually know my friend Carrie, who's probably listening to this podcast, is actually very, very much like Shepherd Book. And I know that Shepherd Book is kind of one of her heroes, and she's very similar to him. So I can very easily imagine Shepherd Book being a woman, because I basically know the female version of Shepherd Book.
I think it'd be a believable performance. I mean, when you have that kind of archetype, so the mentor, or even like the person of faith, the one who rallies everyone together under that, I think it would work just as well with a woman as it would a man. And I think the scene between them and Inara would still work, because it goes on faith.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And faith is powerful, and it can bring people together, and it can break boundaries, I think.
That's definitely true. The only thing that I really would have been more bothered by would be the death of Book, because it's like, and the death of Wash, because it's kind of like, you know, it would make me question the meaning of it more. Like, I really think those deaths kind of represented Joss Whedon's feelings about the end of his show and how Fox treated the show, and I think he saw a lot of himself in Wash. And, you know, of course, everyone pretty much liked Book. So by killing them, it was saying something. But it would have definitely, like, I would have been standoffish if those had both been female characters, because that happens all the time. And it's like, really? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Fox kill them off on purpose because they were planning on doing, like, another show, like pulling a Joey with them or something like that. And I don't know. Wow. In fact, it's kind of funny. I had that spoiled for me before I even saw Serenity the movie.
Oh no.
I didn't even see Serenity up until, like, last year. Like, I was saving myself for a while. And it was still pretty tragic.
Yeah, and like, some of it, sometimes I think, like, okay, did these characters die to, like, protect the other ones, basically, or, like, to make up for the lives of the others that were spared, by the evil plot monster and by the Reavers, and even, to save River, because there was this whole phase where they were like, okay, protect River, and, at the end of the day, I feel like, especially for the character of Book, it was, like, something that he would gladly do, and I don't think a female Book would have felt any differently about that. And I think Wash, like, we learned in War Stories that he's tougher than you think, and he would have definitely, like, died to protect the crew anyway. So it's really interesting, because, Wash, initially, we wouldn't have thought of him as a character that would lay down his life for everyone, but part of grappling with that is that men are expected to do that. Men are expected to go to war. And it's like, there's almost like this stigma against him. Like, there's something wrong with him because, like, he didn't fight in the war with Zoe and Mal. And I don't think the character would have had that same stigma. And I don't think his death would have been exactly the same if Wash had been female. There would have been some other really cool issues to explore there. And I think the character, still would have wanted to prove herself, like, yeah, Mal, this is our adventure. I want to go through this with you. But I don't think it would have been the same.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even counter that. The hero's death is, a pretty big trope in storytelling, the noble sacrifice. As Wash being a woman, I don't think that would have cheapened it, but I definitely think it would have altered at least the audience's societal viewing of it for the reasons you gave.
And also, it might be different if a woman had written it, because I feel like if I had written a character like Wash and Wash was female, and then I killed that character, it would basically mean, like, F you society, this is what you do to us. Whereas since a male, created the character and wrote the character, it might not have been seen that way, even though Joss Whedon is, very much a feminist and very much an ally. So, I think there's, like, he's being careful there too, but it's interesting that, like, the characters that did die were guys. I mean, that's not usually what happens, and you would expect, in addition to that, you would expect the big hero to die. So you would expect Mal to be the one taking the bullet, or maybe someone reckless like Jane, but it wasn't.
No, they're not going to kill off Mal because it's Mal. Only George R. R. Martin types seem to want to kill off the protagonist.
Yeah, but I mean, if he's, like, representing hope, I just feel like when Serenity came out, and I remember when it came out in the theater, but when Serenity came out, I feel like it was great. It was a really awesome, enthusiastic feeling for the fans, but it was also a goodbye. And seeing those characters die was like, Joss Whedon saying goodbye, and you want to wave back and be like, bye. Also, you made me feel a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that brings us...
world we live in, where you get 14 episodes of, Firefly, but, like, 20 seasons of Survivor.
Yeah, right? That's so true. It makes me angry. I still hate Fox, but whatever. Everyone hates them for it. And that actually brings us to our last character of the main cast and crew, which is Serenity herself. And, of course, traditionally, ships are always called her. They're always she. They're always female. And a big part of the series, especially if you listen to the commentary, is that Serenity is a character. And, like, River obviously gets it, and you even wonder, like, is River one with the ship, Like, they even play with that a little bit, too. And, I mean, would it have been different if Serenity was a he?
I don't think they would have, flipped the ship. I mean, the ship is a genderless object. I don't think you can flip it. The tradition of naming ship goes back into, olden times. Like British Navy, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Women weren't allowed on board, so they wanted, some kind of femininity on there. So they named the ship her.
Yeah. I think it also has to do with, like, the ship itself. Like, you have to protect the ship. You have to take care of the ship. Otherwise, you die. So it's kind of like maybe this kind of, like, reminder for the men on the ship of, like, hey, you have to maintain this and protect this, or you won't exist. And, that's okay. Like, that can be seen in a really, like, positive way. Like, sometimes maybe they wouldn't have thought of, even though they might have been, like, protecting women too much, they might not have thought of, like, hey, we should take the time to, like, care about this ship and consider, what it's going through. And it's really interesting that that's stuck. And it's also very interesting that in science fiction, the ship is, I think, almost always a she. I mean, in the Star Trek universe, the Enterprise is always her.
Yeah, I mean, it makes kind of sense if you think about it. They're ships for space, so it makes sense to translate that admiralty to, space stuff.
Yeah,
and I think
I kind of wonder...
and that stuff would also translate over if we ever get off our behinds and get up with the science.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of also wonder, because it's like, there definitely is a sense that Serenity is this character, and there's also the sense of, like, protect and take care of the ship, but there's really not any pressure for, like, the ship will care for you. It's like the crew knows that they have to take care of the ship. And I don't know, I guess I just wonder if the gender were changed. Would they have been like, damn it, Serenity, you were supposed to protect me, just to kind of, like, fit into those gender roles. But, I mean, overall, like, Serenity as a character is kind of one of my favorite things about the show, and the fact that it revolves around her. And I think, like, Mal's attitude towards Serenity is really also reflective of his relationships as they evolve with some of the other female characters. I don't think it's very different at all. Like, he goes through a point where he's like, we can't afford that part to keep Serenity running, and then, like, Serenity breaks down, you know, like, and he goes through that in his relationships with these female characters too, even his platonic relationship with Kaylee and Shindig, when he's like, you're not getting that dress, and then he realizes, you know, okay, because he made it sound like he thinks she was a, what did he say, a sheep walking on his hind legs, and she's like, really? Just because I work in the engine room, you don't think I can wear a pretty dress, or that I don't deserve a pretty dress? And he saw his error, and I think with stern guidance from Zoe, was able to fix that. And I think his relationship with his own ship, you know, kind of goes along that same path and shows Mal's maybe sometimes begrudging respect for the women in his life, including his own ship.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Sometimes I feel Mal is being forced into the oblivious male trope, you know,
that's
one that's
true.
not so feminist that has to be taught everything. It's one I don't appreciate, but I understand why it's there. It's to illustrate these points, so we get to have these memorable, charming moments where our badass captain basically stuck his boot in his mouth repeatedly.
Yeah, and I don't think the audience would consider that flattering, nor would they appreciate it if Mal were female. I just don't think it would even be really, like, part of the character anymore, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that would have happened. You know, all those scenes wouldn't have happened. Like, I think Lady Mal would have been like, let's go get you the prettiest dress there is.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Like, if it had been Lady Mal and you know,
Lady Jane's gonna be like, let's go steal the dress.
That's true, that would have been great. A whole heist just for a dress. Like, that would be hilarious, especially since the dress is part of what enabled them to kind of move the plot forward and accomplish objectives and get some more cargo in Shindig in a very roundabout way.
A dress heist. I would watch that 9 times.
Right? And speaking of Shindig, I mean, there would be the male Kaylee eating the strawberries seductively. I mean, whatever, I could go for that.
Yeah, wow, I completely forgot about that.
Right? And then there's also the episode, I forget which episode it's in, but Wash and Zoe are in they're in their chambers, and they're locked in there, and they've obviously just had some sexy times. And you know, he's like, don't you have to captain the ship? And she's like, you know what happens? Jane will take over. He'll kill everyone. And then she's just like, why don't you just lock the doors and keep the maniac at bay, or whatever she says. And the camera, like, pans along her body, so you see, like, from head to toe, you know, like, you don't see everything or anything like that, but you certainly, like, see that it's emphasizing her form, and that she isn't just a, you know, only a tough badass who kills stuff. She's also, like, the sensual lover to her husband. And I just don't think the camera would have panned the same way if it had been a guy. I don't know. I just don't think it would have. Like, it's still, you know, if it was still filmed with the male gaze.
No, you're 100% right. One of the things when I've studied in film courses has been, if you want real controversy, male nudity. When was the last time you saw it in a movie?
Right.
Frontal male?
Right.
It's
and
because they don't. Somehow,
and as you know, I am...
Shameful. People want to see women, according to this, you know, men executives in Hollywood.
And as you know, I'm a huge fan of Thor. And in the Thor movies, there's always a shirtless Thor scene. And there was even one in Avengers Age of Ultron. And it seemed gratuitous because they didn't give us as much of the story as they should have. And don't get me wrong, I like shirtless Thor, but it wasn't gratuitous. There was story they didn't tell. And even when they show him, and they show him in Thor the Dark World too, and he's supposed to be like, you know, undressing after a battle or getting ready for battle or something, I don't know. that one's a little gratuitous, right? But even that isn't quite filmed the same way. Like, it's filmed in a way I like as a female viewer who thinks Thor is amazingly attractive, but it's not like him laying there in bed while the camera, like, pans down from head to toe, you know what I mean?
He's holding Mjolnir in his teeth like it's a rose.
Woo! It got hot in here. Well, somehow we started talking about Thor.
I don't know, I'm more of a Captain America guy myself, but hey, everybody's different.
There you go. I mean, in Agent Carter, like, Peggy gets dressed up in a really fancy dress and goes undercover, and, I mean, she's tough, but she's not femme fatale in the same way that, like, Black Widow is, until you see her do that, and then you're like, huh, and then I'm kind of like, would Cap ever do that? Would Cap ever get dressed up in whatever? I mean, I think he would. I think he'd do anything for his country, but it would almost be seen as, like, ridiculous, you know, if he were the one to do it.
Yeah, we really don't see that much of that kind of trope with men through the, sexy man whore kind of thing.
And I just think a lot of the scenes with, let's see, Zoe and definitely Inara would be really different. I mean, there's one scene, and it's really tasteful, and it's really expressive of Inara's character, where she is washing herself, and, you know, you just see, you see her in a very pure way, which I think, you know, contrasts with what we, you know, are coming into the series thinking of her job as. You know, we think of that as, like, very dirty, but you see this, like, purity about her, and I just don't think, like, the way that she holds her body and, like, you know, just the way the camera kind of, like, shows her back, like, her washing herself and Thor washing himself in Thor the Dark World are really different, you know? One's about purity and the other is about power.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. If you looked at any of the scenes to where Inara has serviced a client, it's never done so in a way that is objectifying her. To me, it's almost like a sacred rite, like she's performing this service. And the way the camera's angled, it's like similar to what you were describing, the whole purity thing.
Yeah.
We are never, as the audience, made to feel that, her servicing a client is somehow shameful or dirty or,
like, I actually...
Sexy. It's just a job.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that, you know, like, the sexy times happen, but it's, like, only part of what she does. Like, especially when she takes on Fast Higgins as a client, the younger man, and she, you can tell that, like, 99% of what went on there was her, like, helping him, was her listening to him, was her encouraging him, was her undoing the damage that his asshole father, did to him. Like, she's there as, like, a healer to undo the damage of, you know, all these things that his father, like, said, you know, that were very much, like, a result of that patriarchal construct, you know?
Yeah, like, I got therapy out of that session that, you know, like, it might as well have been sat in reclining chairs talking about feelings.
Exactly. I think that's what happened, and I think that's something that even if Inara were a guy, I think that would be similar. I mean, there's a book by Paulo Coelho called 11 Minutes, and it's about a prostitute who's female, but she learns that most of the time what her clients want to hear, one, is to talk to someone. Like, there's a pressure because of what society expects a prostitute to do, you know, that there's going to be sex, but, like, a lot of it is, like, talking through issues, and since society, like, tells men, like, it's bad to talk about your feelings, like, where are they going to go with that? And the socially acceptable answer to that is a prostitute, you know, and I think maybe some of that would still happen if Inara was male, but I think it was Inara male servicing female clients, it would be actually, like, more expected for that to happen, like for there to be feelings and stuff, because the clients would be like, females unleashing feelings, and that's already acceptable.
Oh, don't forget, she had a same-sex client that one time.
She did. That's right. That's true.
Imagine that. Sexy man, Inaro going, and then there's this other dude there. I wonder what the audience reaction would be.
Inaro. So, speaking of Inaro, let's see. How many of them would have to change their name? So, Inaro would work. River could be a name of a male or a female. River Phoenix was male. We have Jane, who could obviously still be Jane. Maybe Kaylee could be Kyle?
Carl?
Yeah. Carl, Kyle, Cal.
Yeah. Better.
Yeah. Simon could easily be Simone, right? Wash. Well, Wash is a nickname from Wash's last name, but I feel like that wouldn't have. I just feel like the crew wouldn't assign that to a woman, so I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know about Zoe either. Maybe like Zane or Zeke or something like that.
Wash's first name is Hoban.
Yeah, that's true. You could do like Rowan.
Yeah, there we go.
That would work. And then female Mal.
Mala?
Yeah, Mala, maybe. I don't know. That could work too. And then Shepherd Book, like, would have to just be Shepherd Book.
Yeah, I really couldn't see messing with Shepherd's name at all.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be any difference. And Serenity will always be Serenity. Let's not mess with that, right?
Yeah, I don't think we can mess with that.
Any final thoughts on this topic before we close out?
I mean, oh my God, so many. I love Firefly, but no, Josh Wheaton, if you're listening to this, do it. Gender bend Firefly, call something else, make it happen.
Fun. That would be great. I want to see it happen. My favorite relationship on the show, romantic relationship on the show, is Simon and Kaylee, and that's the one I'd actually be most hesitant about the gender swap, because they already do, as they do some things that are outside of their traditional gender roles, and Kaylee's the one that pursues Simon. So I think that's the only one I'd be like super sad about seeing changed. I think Jane it would be awesome to see what a female Jane was like. And I think Book would be like, there would be very little difference if Book was female.
Yeah, that's that. I agree to that.
So, this has been the Geek Initiative Podcast. I'm Tara the Bard, and Lee joined us on this episode, and we had a great discussion about a Firefly gender bender and what would happen were the genders changed around, and how the relationships between those characters might change. Please consider subscribing to the Geek Initiative Podcast on iTunes, or you can always just keep updated on our site at geekinitiative.com. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.